Alright students, for our 7th week of continuous learning, we're going to be talking about women's suffrage, women's rights. Before we really go into the topic, we need to define what suffrage is. Click on your definition. You'll see that suffrage is the right to vote in an election. So if we're talking about women's suffrage, that means we're talking about women getting the right to vote. Our contemporary debate is something called the E.R.A, the Equal Rights Amendment. As you know, women can now vote. Women were given the right to vote in 1920. But did the right to vote solve all of the issues that women wanted to deal with? Turns out no. So the next year after that, the women who fought for the right to vote introduced something called the Equal Rights Amendment. It said, equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. So this means all rights, not just the right to vote, all rights. Read the article or listen to the article and answer the questions. Explain what the E.R.A is, why people support it, why people oppose it, and then your beliefs at the time. We are now going to study something called House Joint Resolution Number 1, proposing an amendment to the Constitution of the United States, extending the right of suffrage to women. We'll go to the website. Oops. And here we are, House Joint Resolution Number 1. This is the actual text of it as it appeared in Congress, but we can read right here. The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. So you all know that if you are abridging something, you're shortening it or not meeting it. So this is saying that the right of citizens shall not be denied based on their... So basically, what right is this going to give to women? What was going on at the time, our historic context, while there were women advocating for women's rights way back in 1776, such as Abigail Adams, in 1848 we have the first Women's Rights Convention at Seneca Falls, New York. Elizabeth Cady Stanton writes the Declaration of Sentiments. This was a declaration of all the things that women thought they deserved. Guess which one of those was? Following that, the women's rights movement is also aligned with the abolitionist movement. That's the ending of slavery. So while they were fighting for rights for women, they were also fighting for the rights for the enslaved people. We start debating the 14th Amendment and the 15th Amendment, which were guaranteeing rights to the freemen, African Americans. Some women supported this, but other women were upset that they were fighting for rights for more people, but not including women in that group. Some exciting things happen along the way. Let's see, in 1872, Susan B. Anthony, a woman who could not legally vote, cast a vote for Ulysses S. Grant in the presidential election, and she's arrested and put on trial just for voting. We have a number of states who start allowing women to have the right to vote, starting with 1890. Wyoming becomes a state and they give women the right to vote. Colorado, Utah, Washington State, all of these state-by-state cases, people are choosing in their state to allow women to vote. Kansas joins that collection in 1912. And we'll skip ahead to 1918, President Wilson states support for a federal women's suffrage amendment. We need to find out why some people support expanding rights to women's. We're going to read a speech by the first female member of Congress, Jeannette Rankin, who is a Republican from Montana. Remember that I told you women were given rights to vote in certain states, including Montana. So we have a woman member of Congress standing, delivering a speech, explaining why the rest of women in the United States should be able to vote. Highlight text that you think explains best why women should be given rights and why the government should stand up for them. She said, "We are facing today a question of political evolution. Our country is in a state of war. We are using all our resources for the ideals of democracy, but something is lacking in our national effort. Is it possible that the women have something to give the nation?" So this first one, we're talking about what World War I is happening at this time, and President Woodrow Wilson has says that we're fighting for democracy. But if women in America can't vote, think about that. For 70 years, the women leaders of this country have been asking the government to recognize this possibility. Every great woman in our history has asked the government to permit women to serve the nation more effectively. How can people in other countries trying to understand our democracy avoid stumbling over our logic when we deny the first steps in democracy to our women? What's it called when you say one thing, but you don't really live up to it? It starts with H. We've talked about it this semester. Is it hypocrisy? If we go around the world saying we believe in democracy, but we don't really have it, are we hypocrites? Deep down in the hearts of the American people is faith in democracy. It prompts in us the desire for justice based on equal opportunity, equal protection, equal freedom for all. Today, there are men and women using all their energies because they believe that we are waging a war for democracy. The people believe that Congress knows what democracy means. Can we afford to allow people to doubt for a single instant the sincerity of our claims of democracy? How shall we explain to them the meaning of democracy if the same Congress that voted for war to make the world safe for democracy refuses to give this small measure of democracy to the women of our country? What reasons does Ms. Rankin believe women should have equal rights and the government should stand up for them? Then how does that relate to today's debate over the E.R.A? Let's scroll down to our cartoon. National Suffrage, Women's Suffrage Publishing Company's broadside, "Give Mother the Vote. We need it." Okay, so we have a bunch of babies marching with a slogan, "Votes for our mothers." Our food, our health, our play, our homes, our schools, our work are ruled by men's votes. Isn't it a funny thing that father cannot see why mother ought to have a vote on how these things should be? So if we're talking 1900s, early 1900s, women are sometimes stuck in the home and their duties are thought to be taking care of the food, taking care of the family, all of those things. So if it's women's job to take care of those things, don't you think she knows a lot about those things? And if you know a lot about something, should you have a say in it? How is this document making an argument for women having equal rights? Now we need to determine why some people opposed giving suffrage to women. In 1914, the Nebraska Association opposed to women's suffrage created a flyer titled 10 Reasons Why the Great Majority of Women Do Not Want the Ballot. Let's read some of these reasons and try and find out why. Because they have not lost faith in their fathers, husbands, sons, and brothers, who afford full protection to the community, there being no call for women to relieve them of the task. Why does a woman need to vote when the ideas she believes in are being fought for by her father or husband? Second, because women realize that when they become voters, they will in consequence have to serve as jurors and be forced to hear all the horrible details of murder trials and trials for other wicked crimes. This is the idea of with equal rights come equal responsibilities. If women get to vote, they're equal citizens. They have equal responsibility to serve on a jury. And some women apparently don't want that same responsibility. So they're willing to sacrifice certain rights if that means they don't have the same responsibilities. Because in politics there's constant fighting and bitterness, producing conditions from which every normal woman avoids. Because the primary object of government is to protect persons and property, this duty is forced by nature on men, the women being by nature released from taking a task impossible for them. Because when women noisily fight for public office, woman pitted against woman, They make all women look bad. So this idea right here, you all have seen people argue over politics. Why would women want to get swept up in that? If women are fighting about politics, just like people today fight about politics, sometimes they look dumb, don't they? Why would women back then want to get involved in that? Because women can accomplish more through counseling than they ever can attain through commanding. Because women's suffrage will not enhance peace and harmony in the home, but the opposite. Politics causes disagreements and fights. If a woman and her husband disagree about politics, is that going to make the home a happier place? Because Nebraska women are already enjoying more protection and privilege than do women of any state where women vote. Because the woman worker wants rest and quietude, not political excitement. Because every reason supporting the claim of women to vote supports the right of women to be consulted as to whether they shall or shall not be given the ballot. Okay, so if they're arguing for democracy, should we then allow women to decide if they want to vote? If the majority of women don't want to vote, wouldn't the democratic thing be to not let them vote? All right. Which cartoon did we pick to look at? Let's see. Okay, as you could guess, this was probably going to be a sexist idea. In 1909, E.W. Gustin drew a cartoon titled Election Day. This woman right here, the wife, is a suffragette. She wants to vote. What's going to happen if the woman is leaving to go vote? Oh no, Dad's stuck at home with the kids. What's going to happen to the household? Yeah, clearly, some people opposed giving women the right to vote for sexist reasons. How is this related to today's debate? It's a little bit harder. If people were afraid of back then giving more women rights because it enables women to do something that will cause chaos, are there some people today that think the E.R.A. is going to protect a right for a woman to do something that some people are against? It's not voting. As you remember in the article, it has to do with abortion. Alright, so you clearly know that women can vote. So this did actually pass. It was passed and became the 19th Amendment. It was ratified and became law in 1920. So it's actually kind of cool. This is the 100th year anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment. There were some women who in 2016 were able to vote for the first female presidential nominee of a major party that were over 100 years old, but when they were born, they were not allowed to vote. Women were not allowed to vote. But even though women got this right to vote, some quickly found out that it didn't deliver all of the equality that they were hoping for, so the next year they introduced the E.R.A., which you learned about at the very start of this assignment. Women are still fighting for that right, for the E.R.A. But we do need to talk about the 19th Amendment, that it was supposed to give women the right to vote. But which women did it actually secure that right to? Turns out, because of restrictions on voting at that time, Jim Crow laws prevented African Americans from being able to vote, including women. Asian Americans, Native Americans, other ethnic minorities were often barred from voting, whether by law or by other things such as poll taxes or literacy taxes. So while the 19th Amendment on paper gave women the right to vote, it was not very successful in securing that right to all women. It's not until the 1965 Voting Rights Act that made laws that made voting harder, such as literacy tests, illegal. There are still barriers today, though, preventing some women from being able to vote, such as laws not allowing felons to vote. So when we're talking about the consequences of this decision, yes, they did the right thing then and gave women the right to vote. But did it achieve that much? Who really got to vote? And was voting enough? Comparing and contrasting our two debates, similarity, we're talking about women's rights. In the past, what were they fighting for? The right to vote. Today, it's the E.R.A. If you have questions, please email me. Remember, the last part of this assignment will be extra credit.